Good morning, everybody, and many thanks indeed for joining us. We have almost 200 people joining us this morning, so we're absolutely thrilled. Thank you very much indeed for taking some time out of your busy day. Just to let you know, as attendees, you can see the panel, but the panel can't see or hear you. So hopefully, Mark and Malcolm, if you could put your webcams on and join us, that would be fantastic. If you've got any questions during the session, which are very welcome indeed, could you please type them into the questions box to the right of your screen, just throughout the presentation. Don't worry about waiting till the end, just type them in and we'll be checking them throughout the session and then get to as many of those questions as we can at the end of the session. Just also to let you know that the full video of this webinar will be posted for you to view again, and those details will be sent out to you over the next couple of days. If anybody's got any technical issues, they can use the question panel again, and we'll try and help you the best we can. There's also a telephone number you can use to connect if you can't access the video. So, good morning. What a year this has been so far. It seems like not long ago that we were planning for a slightly calmer year this year. Well, that was my hope and aspiration. With a little bit of short-term letting regulation and gearing up to looking at the impending arrival of the tourism tax, we were already dealing actively with the Scottish Government's short-term let delivery group, and we published our well-received policy papers. Kind of felt like we had a pretty good grip on the future and we knew where we were heading. And then we found ourselves with that pernicious little virus called COVID-19. And it had very different ideas for 2020. It would have been really easy for our industry to train ourselves and hunker down and try to pretend that it wasn't happening. It would have been simple of us to pick the path of least resistance, and would have been easy to deliberately avoid the hard work and pick the easy life. But that's not who we are as an association or indeed as an industry. And I'm joined today by two of the hardest working men in this industry. So thank you so much for joining us, Mark and Malcolm. We've done the hard work. We continue to do the hard work. As self-caterers, we shut our properties down at huge personal and professional cost. And by doing so, we cut the risk of COVID-19 impacting us and our guests. We reopened as early as possible to give our sector a fighting chance of rebounding from the hit that it's taken. We put into place strict cleaning protocols, which have been endorsed by the Scottish Government, to show that self-catering is safe, reliable and reassuring for both Scots and from those from abroad, who we are looking forward to welcome back as soon as we can. This talk is focused on leadership, recovery and opportunity. I thought it was a really good opportunity to do that, to look at those issues at the beginning of our Autumn Talks series. We all know that COVID-19 has posed an unprecedented, the word of 2020, challenge to the entire tourism sector, including self-catering. From the outset of the pandemic and the introduction of the lockdown, the self-catering sector has demonstrated considerable leadership and perseverance as we responsibly closed our businesses at great personal cost. Individual self-caterers also demonstrated leadership by providing free or discounted accommodation to key workers, including our vital NHS workers. Throughout the pandemic, I hope you'll have seen that the ASSC has fought the corner of its members and indeed the whole sector at all times, keeping them informed of unfolding developments over platforms and engaging with leading tourism stakeholders, MSPs and the Scottish Government to ensure the best outcomes for our sector. Ensuring that our sector would recover from the challenge of COVID-19 was dependent on ensuring that businesses could access the support grants that they needed to survive. You'll have all seen how hard we worked as an association to ensure that we got as much cover and support as possible. We undertook lengthy and sustained process of lobbying ministers and officials to help rectify some of the issues with the eligibility criteria that the Scottish Government produced at the beginning of the pandemic. And we have been successful in some parts. This work culminated in the creation of an additional £1 million fund from the Scottish Government, which we're administering alongside our partners at VisitScotland to those businesses who were excluded from accessing the grants originally. But before we open, and also consumers that we could provide a safe environment for visitors in the context of COVID-19. The ASSC worked tirelessly, and we are tired, to produce cleaning protocols that the UK government and all devolved governments, including here in Scotland, have endorsed. Following quite a lot of lobbying and supported by the STA, we were able to secure an earlier reopening of the self-catering sector than was originally intended, ensuring that the Scottish Government stuck to an evidence-led process against our sometimes vocal detractors. This provided a £20 million boost to the Scottish economy and was incredibly welcome. The tourism sector is now reopened, and self-catering operators the length and breadth of Scotland are returning to what they do best, showcasing Scotland's unique hospitality and offering safe and memorable experiences to visitors. There's a huge opportunity now to remind the domestic market of the benefits of holidaying closer to home, providing benefits to local communities, as well as providing for the overseas market. Over the next few months, the sector will have to respond to the Scottish Government's plans to introduce a licensing system and control areas for short-term lets. And I can assure you that is what we will be concentrating fully on over the next few months. But with our experience gained and the way we've helped to shape the safe and responsible reopening of the tourism sector, we've got an opportunity here to influence the regulations in a way that works for both businesses, tourism and local communities. And that's what we intend to do. In terms of our organisation, the ASSC's membership has now swelled and stands at over 1,000 professional and dedicated self-catering operators, amplifying the voice of a sector that generates £723 million to the Scottish economy per year. Slight sales pitch here: if you're not a member of the ASSC at the moment, please do join us. The more members we have, the stronger our voice is. I'm incredibly proud of the ASSC, and I'm proud of every one of you in our sector. We've done so well so far over really challenging times, and there's a bright future ahead. As a sector, we are best placed to bounce back. We can face upcoming challenges like the Scottish Government's licensing legislation with some sense of optimism and confidence. There are obviously going to be difficulties and challenges to overcome, we know that, but the ASSC and its members have already led the way in the safe and responsible reopening of our sector, and our professional operators will carry on helping to strengthen the recovery of tourism and help build a sustainable future for our industry. And alongside the STA, we will work towards making Scotland a leader in 21st century tourism for the benefit of all who live and visit our country. But for now, I'd like to welcome you to the series of autumn talks that take the place of our usual conference. Over the course of these webinars, we'll continue the important job of sharing knowledge, supporting our members, building networks, and doing all we can to support our industry and promote tourism in Scotland. I hope you'll enjoy these as a placeholder until we can get back together in person. Hopefully 2021 will be our next conference in person. I'm delighted to be sharing a platform today with Malcolm Roughead and Mark Crothall, two titans of tartan tourism, who have been instrumental in guiding our sector through COVID-19 and in building up a vision for the future. My personal thanks to you both for all that you've done to support our sector and our wider industry. You've been great friends of self-catering, and we're incredibly grateful for that friendship. I'd like to thank our valued partners for business, Super Control, Cumberland Business, Bruce Stevenson, Discover Scotland, Home Away, Interhome and DM Hall, and sponsors at Tunnocks, Visit Scotland and Beyond Pricing, without whom these talks wouldn't be happening. The ASSC is incredibly grateful for your continued support and backing. So that being said, I'd like to welcome you once again to the series of talks. Please listen, speak, engage, reflect on what's gone by and what the opportunities are going forwards. As I've said throughout this pandemic, there are challenges, but there's also a lot of opportunities to be had. And I hope that these talks will help you with what you will need to equip navigating through the next few months. First of all, I'd like to welcome Mark Crothall. I'm sure everybody on this webinar will know Mark. Mark spent all of his 40 years working in tourism, leisure and hospitality. He was appointed the Chief Executive of the Scottish Tourism Alliance in June 2012, and during this time has led the organisation to becoming one of the strongest representative trade bodies in the country. Earlier in 2020, he was awarded the Fellowship by the Scottish hotel industry for his outstanding contribution to the industry. Mark recently chaired the National Strategy Steering Group that was charged with developing and overseeing Scotland's future tourism strategy, Scotland Outlook 2030, which the ASSC was also part of. This was launched at the beginning of 2020 by Nicola Sturgeon and has since had a COVID overlay, one of my favourite expressions. He's leading industry representative on the Scottish Tourism Emergency Response Group and the Scottish Government's Tourism Task Force. Mark, welcome.
Good morning. Thank you very much, Fiona, for that introduction, and thank you very much for inviting me to be part of your first talk. Being referred to as a titan of tartan tourism is a new name for me. So, but importantly, thank you to everybody at the ASSC for coming together as you have done to help the industry collectively lead us through this turbulent time. Yes, 40 years in this industry, and I don't think I've ever worked so hard in my life. I did have hair before the COVID virus came. It's nothing to do with the virus, I'm told. It makes you lose your hair. It's the number of hours that you've worked to recover. As you referred to there, yes, March 2020, the month that's changed our world. It seemed quite surreal, stood on the stage with the First Minister on the 4th of March, launching our future tourism strategy, Scotland Outlook 2030, a responsible tourism for a sustainable future. So importantly, I think, this is a talk about leadership and collaboration, and we've always said that coming together, the need for leadership and collaboration is what's going to make our industry prosper, flourish, and really be that force for good that we've set, that we want it to be. So this COVID intervention has really thrown us into an accelerated mode and required us to step up the level of leadership and collaboration than we've never seen before. And it's thanks to, say, the likes of yourselves and the wider sector coming together as we did very quickly, and together with our colleagues at Visit Scotland and the agencies to build the immediate response plan to get the country going again as best as possible. I think what we should be mindful of is that right now an awful lot of our industry is actually still closed, and many businesses out there haven't managed to actually take a penny through their door, and there are a huge number of colleagues who very sadly have lost their job, and it is going to be a long haul for recovery. Thankfully, the self-catering sector, through lots of late conversations and pressure asserted by yourself, Fiona, and others, was able to get open sooner than we'd hoped. And from all accounts, it's been a very buoyant sector throughout the country, with the exception of the cities. And we're grateful for that. And I think leading from the front is what the industry needed. But when it comes to planning for the future, it's even more important now that we set out our stall and not paint a picture of one that is we are okay, because we're by no means okay. We're a long way short from that, and it's still a very bleak outlook. I was just off my board call this morning and hearing from one of our board directors recounting Jason Leach's recent update on the virus and what that is going to mean for us in terms of needing to be socially distanced for a lot longer than perhaps many of us might think, the continuation to wear masks, and with that, of course, will come nervousness amongst the community and those who choose to perhaps holiday, or hopefully will holiday here in Scotland. So sentiment is something that we will have to be very conscious of. That said, looking to innovate and find solutions to try and reassure and overcome those future markets and future customers is going to be critical in what we do, and making sure that we represent in every way possible that our industry can be safe and is safe for many to go out and enjoy. And the importance of getting people out, spending money in our economies, and keeping tourism going has never been more so now. So we will continue through the STA to engage more ministers and more colleagues from the wider industry and different sectors of the economy around the tourism agenda. And it is, as is Malcolm's, a long day every day of the week, and I'm very grateful to my small team that sit behind me and who have communicated and will continue to communicate all of the developments and outputs and representations of both yours and others within our membership group over the coming weeks and months ahead. as we ride through this. But it's not just going to be dependency on our domestic market, as I know Malcolm will touch on. We need to get our international friends back here as well and get that balance of tourism and guest profile right up there with the rest, so we can have some year-round trade. And importantly, in the more immediate months, we have to get our cities going again and get that footfall into those big businesses in town, and getting those self-catering owners and operators premises filled as well through the winter months, and keep Scotland moving. So I'll stop there for now, and certainly look forward to sharing some more comments and thoughts in the next few weeks, a few minutes.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you. And Malcolm, thank you so much for joining us. Malcolm was appointed Visit Scotland's Chief Executive in September 2010, having held the position of Director of Marketing since 2001. Malcolm was awarded with the title of Scottish Marketeer of the Year at the 2004 Scottish Marketing Awards, and in 2005 received an OBE for services to tourism, another titan of tartan tourism. Thanks, Malcolm, for joining us.
Thank you very much, Fiona, and good morning to everybody who unfortunately we can't see, but it's a great pleasure to be here this morning and to be able to answer any questions that you may have during the course of the morning. Just to echo what Mark was saying, I think it's really important that we don't forget that not all of the industry, the wider industry, is up and running yet. There are obviously great success stories around the country, and that's so heartening to see. Self-catering, as you know, is doing particularly well. Motorhomes, caravan parks, outdoor activity providers. None of that is a great surprise, because all the research from not just in the UK but also across Europe and other markets would indicate that rural destinations and coastal locations are the preferential choice for people to get away. And Mark alluded to the cities and the work that needs to be done there, and that's a reflection not just of the fact that not everything is open yet, but also just the nervousness that still prevails across the country in terms of COVID and being around social distancing. Now, that's not a great surprise when you consider that for every day for 6 months we've been told about, you know, the impact of COVID on people and the need to socially distance. So it takes a while for confidence to return. There are other sectors like business events, obviously the sporting and cultural events and festivals. I'm sitting in Edinburgh, and it's a very strange feeling not to have the Edinburgh festivals and the vibrancy that goes with that all around you, and it is a very quiet place. And we see that again, as Mark alluded to, in terms of occupancy within the city itself. And I'm sure some of your own members, Fiona, who have self-catering properties in the cities will echo that sentiment as well. But there are green shoots, and that's great to see. It's always caveated by what may happen next. And a good example of that is we were about to launch our French and Dutch campaigns, and then the day after they were put on the quarantine list, so we had to pull that. So one of the key areas that we're looking at is flexibility and agility, and the ability to turn on and off activity according to the conditions that prevail at the time. I'm also delighted that visitor attractions are opening up as well. And again, in that particular sector, what you're seeing is a lot of innovation in the way that they manage visitor footfall, using technology, just as we're all doing now. I'm sure many of us had never heard of Zoom before all of this, and those that perhaps were a bit reluctant to use technology are mastering it in a very effective way. The difficulty we have is very often I get asked, well, what's the season going to look like coming up? And the real answer is I don't know. No one knows. But what we have to do is we work with what we've got, and we work with the evidence that we have in front of us. And we do know that forward booking and also sentiment is very strong. So Scotland is definitely up there. We do a lot of tracking in terms of research. We look at consumer sentiment, we look at business sentiment, and also just as important, we look at community sentiment. So how do people feel about visitors coming into their particular area? And there's a lot of work that's been going on behind the scenes through the destination organisations, the national parks, community councils, and others, to make sure that communities feel part of the industry, and so that they have an ownership in it. And because ultimately they are actually part of the experience that people receive when they come to Scotland. People love talking to local people. They love going into the local bars and having a chat, finding out what there is to see and do. And whilst we think, you know, we are part of the industry and it comes naturally to us to share that information, it's actually the hidden gems that only the locals know about that make that experience so special. So we need to make sure that everybody is on board. And I think, you know, the likes of the Scottish Tourism Alliance, led by Mark and others, have done a fantastic job in rallying people to the flag and making sure that, you know, tourism is up there. And I think that if anything that's come out of this, it's the understanding of just how important the tourism economy is to the overall economy in Scotland. And those that perhaps saw Scotland in a slightly tourism in a slightly one-dimensional way, i.e. it's just about accommodation, have suddenly woken up, realised, hang on, it's about painters, decorators, it's about carpet fitters, florists, tobacconists, and all of that. And they all benefit from the tourism economy. So everyone has an equal share in making sure that this great industry can go forward, but go forward in a very considered way, in a way that actually takes into account, as I said, the prevailing conditions, but also the sentiment that is out there at the moment. We have to accept that there is nervousness. There will continue to be nervousness, particularly when lockdowns happen, you know, be they specific areas. And I would imagine right now the biggest concern is about universities going back, colleges going back, and the government will definitely be looking very closely at what the impact, if any, of that is going to be. And that will shape future decisions over the next sort of 3 to 4 months. So quite happy, Fiona, to take any questions as they come in.
Brilliant. Well, we have got some already. Thank you both so much. It's just really important to give our members the opportunity to speak directly to you guys, because, you know, you're in all sorts of high-level meetings, but it's really good to have this opportunity. So thank you so much. Malcolm, we have a question that actually goes back to something you've just been discussing about marketing campaigns. Visit Scotland paused its domestic marketing campaign in England. Can you update on when this is likely to restart?
Well, again, it's very much about timing. So what we need, normally speaking, for broadcast media, so television, radio, etc., is a 2 to 3 week window, just because you have to reschedule everything and get it all ready. But we have never stopped actually doing social media. We've never stopped looking at digital platforms, and that's also in the case in Europe and further afield in North America, etc. And that's very much under the sort of dream now, travel later mantra, which is keeping Scotland top of mind, making sure that people want to come to Scotland, but just saying to them, you just can't do that right now, unfortunately. So it's a very delicate balance between trying to convert into an actual booking and actually just making sure that you're top of mind and out there with through the clutter, because every other destination, let's not forget, is also doing the same thing, and they're trying to make sure that their destination is just as attractive a proposition for people. But again, you look at the uncertainty this morning. Again, they're talking about potentially Portugal going on to the quarantine list. So we just have to be agile, Fiona. But we haven't turned off the tap at all.
Brilliant. And another one on the same sort of question. is the money which isn't being spent on inbound marketing going to be invested in the domestic market? If so, when are we going to start to see this?
Well, I think you're already seeing it. We have been working quite hard on the domestic market, and we continue to do so. Clearly, where we're looking at right now is very much about how we can stimulate activity in the cities and try and help those that are in that particular area. Now, a lot of that will also be organic, because as more and more attractions and restaurants, etc., all begin to open up, the proposition becomes much greater for people to actually go in and enjoy, time. We're seeing that to a certain extent in Dundee. The V&A's opened up just recently. Anyone who's interested in fashion might want to see his exhibition. But that's a major attraction, and also next door to it, Discovery is doing particularly well, albeit the the capacity is constrained because of social distancing. But the visitor attractions have actually got their heads around how to manage that very well. So at the moment, we are active. We're out there. We're pushing as much as we can do. But it may well be that, because it's highly targeted and it's all very digital first at the moment, it may well be that your questionnaire hasn't actually seen the activity at present. But it is there. It's all on visitscotland.org if you go and have a look at it. Just give a little plug. And also at visitscotland.com, you can also see the video activity that we have.
And I mean, from our point of view as an association, we've been liaising directly with Visit Scotland and Vicky Miller constantly throughout the last few months to make sure that when you do start doing the targeted marketing, it's at the right time in the right place. And that collaboration has been really, really welcome. And I know that Self-Catering and obviously all other industry bodies in places like Edinburgh and city centres are still having a torrid time, but there's a time and a place. There's no point in targeting marketing until the time is right. Would that be the right sort of way of looking at it?
Yes, as long as the proposition is strong enough, then you can actually do the marketing, and that's one of the it's one of the unintended consequences of the industry not opening at the same time. So obviously a staggered approach. It was great that self-catering, but no one else could. But it actually met a demand that people wanted to get away, to get out of the cities, the urban areas by and large, and into rural areas, as I mentioned. And that trend will continue. And we do quite a lot of work at the moment with Google, and Google data is pulled together from mobile phone activity. And we can still see, if you took January, February as your base, which is not the busiest time in the year anyway, but right now, the propensity for people to go into major urban areas, not just in Scotland, but this is right across Europe, is at 40 percentage points less than it was in January, February. And that's just, a fact. Unfortunately, that will take time before people get the confidence to go back in. And also, you can also look at public transport, and the current figure is about 20% of capacity. So again, that just reflects where people are in terms of their confidence.
Yeah, that's interesting. Mark, something for you. Somebody has asked about threats to the sector over the next sort of 6 to 12 months. Now, we've obviously seen clear evidence that visitors are choosing self-catering as the least sort of risky COVID accommodation option. We're also now about to face Scottish Government short-term letting legislation and planning control areas coming in. What do you think, somebody has asked, the STA can do to assist the sector, ensure that government doesn't damage the tourism industry's self-catering-led recovery? by introducing expensive licensing legislation? I suspect we'll be having that conversation a few times over the next few months.
Well, Fiona, I think as part of the STIRG plan we've set out, it's in 4 phases, as I said, the initial response, rescue, reset, restart and recover. We are in the task force itself, which was established in an effort to address recovery, touching on demand, which Malcolm's led on a work group investment as well, but also business recovery and workforce recovery. One of the things the SGA have been making very clear is that we need to avoid introducing any other unnecessary regulation that costs money, that costs time and effort. We need to create the best possible environment for businesses to recover through. We've been very welcome of course, had the VAT reduction. We've had the removal of business rates. We've had hopefully a tourist tax put on the back burner for a long period of time. There are issues going through around food standards. We've got all of these other unnecessary in terms of interventions that could be about to happen. And actually we asked government, as I said at the committee last week, that they work with the industry, they listen to what the industry would really like to see to enable a smooth pathway through into a new world. I mean, we are going into a completely new, unknown, uncharted world of tourism, and our landscape and our product offer will change. We will unfortunately see a lot of businesses fail. We will see different products come about. So the blend has to be right. So before any knee-jerk reaction to addressing or implementing new approaches, there needs to be a pause button pressed quickly, and have some very sensible conversations with government and the industry together, and goes back to this collaboration piece about working together through this to make sure the environment is absolutely fit for purpose, and tourism can continue to be a force for good for everybody. And Malcolm touched on one of the wins probably of COVID has actually hopefully made clear to all the doubters and those who have been anti-tourism that actually without a buoyant tourism industry, the wider economy and many other people's lives are impacted in a negative way.
Well, that's incredibly welcome. We do need to kind of put a pause/slow down button on the short-term let delivery group, I suspect, but that's another conversation that we'll be having over the next few weeks. There's a good question here about infrastructure. Rural Scotland holidays are seeing their turn in the sun, but there's huge pressure on infrastructure. Highland roads, making access to the countryside difficult and unwelcoming in places. There have been some local solutions, but will we see a return of infrastructure fund suitably beefed up to reflect the higher visitor numbers? Any ideas, Mark?
Well, again, as part of the Scotland Outlook 2030 strategy, which is still very much a relevant strategy, and our work stream through recovery is to segue back into that particular ambition and aim to, make Scotland the world leader in 21st century tourism. The 4 priority areas of that strategy were around people, in business, place, and experience, and of course to make sure our places can be accessible and reached. We need to have that necessary investment into the infrastructure to allow people to get out and about and see and experience more of Scotland. That is still very, very relevant, and of course, we've seen some unfortunate behaviour and changes of holiday mode, particularly around camping and caravanning, and areas of Scotland where there is insufficient infrastructure in place to accommodate that type of visitor. Admittedly, there are many who who need some education and some of the basic practices and common decency around how to holiday. But as part of the work stream of the task force, again, it's been there to identify from an investment point of view what should be prioritised and how can we make sure that we get that better infrastructure in play. We look at many more people with no coach travel now, of course, driving cars around the country. We're moving towards the green agenda as well. So how can we electrify more people, more places for that recharging piece? And of course, you know, we're in a technology world now as well. So the importance of upweighting and accelerating a better digital infrastructure is going to be essential as well. So it's certainly high on the agenda in terms of priorities for consideration around upweighting the artist fund and investment provision into tourism infrastructure as a whole. And that's not forgetting, of course, transport outside of how do we make our access more easier and more accessible for many other types of transport too. So moving people around will be key. And you know, we've got to allow people to have that choice and feel safe and easy in doing so.
Thanks, Mark. We've just had a thank you, just an opportunity to say a massive thank you to the 3 Titans. You've been on overdrive since March, and we're so grateful for your work. That's very, very nice. Another interesting question here. How do you see the Scottish tourism industry's relationship with the OTAs developing? I think this one's for Malcolm, I'm afraid. Given the latter's appalling behaviour during the crisis in refunding customer cancellation payments out with terms agreed between hosts and customers. I know that Visit Scotland are currently working with Expedia. What is the rationale behind this?
Right, we work with all OTAs, be it TripAdvisor, Expedia. We work with social media. And the way that we work with them is very much in a targeted way. They have a reach that stretches into the multi-millions that otherwise you just could not afford to do. I'm aware of 1 or 2 issues that arose, certainly, and behind the scenes I know there was a lot of representation made for you know, the OTAs to work hand in hand with providers and to come to a sensible solution. I think some of those conversations are still going on, but in terms of our interest in the OTAs is they do offer a platform for us to reach an audience that we would never be able to reach. And that's not just in the UK, but that's in North America, it's in the Far East. And they are a fact of life. You know, they are there. They're not going to go away. So we need to work with them, and we need to make sure that you know, we work harmoniously with them. And I think, you know, Mark will agree, but when you actually talk to them, I don't think they deliberately go out of their way to be a bugbear to the industry. But sometimes, you know, you actually have to point out the bleeding obvious to them, and in a very direct, forthright manner. And we'll continue to do that.
Yeah, I would agree with what Malcolm said. You know, we can't do without them. And, you know, it comes back to that word collaboration again. And again, you know, we've woken up to a big wide world where we're all trying to grapple with this. So there's a lot of learning to be had. And it's about how do you build on those relationships for the benefit of everyone. You know, what we didn't foresee and really understand was that, you know, businesses had an average of 23 days shelf life in terms of liquidity. And I think that's taken us by surprise, and everyone by surprise, from you know, the government right the way down to our own operators. So we have to work together to try and make sure that we don't fall into a similar hole again, because sad though it may be, COVID will go, something else will come around the corner, and we need to be prepared to respond to that in a much better way than we've been able to do so far. And that's not saying it's been bad, but the pace of change things have to go at is so rapid. If we can be better prepared, then we won't well, potentially not see so many people fall and lose their jobs.
Absolutely. Slight change of topic, but very interesting. Do you think we're seeing a different type of visitors to Scotland this year? This can be seen positively with new visitors experiencing Scotland for the first time, which naturally we need to encourage and harness. However, we've also seen many reports where communities are suffering with negative aspects of tourism through wild camping, littering and damage to rural areas. How can or should this be tackled? To either of you, I suppose.
Well, are we seeing new visitors? What we're actually seeing is a lot more people who live in Scotland travelling around the country and discovering the country. Obviously, we're not seeing international visitors for obvious reasons. We are seeing a few more from south of the border, particularly from the north of England. And in terms of, I think it goes back to a point Mark made a little bit earlier when we were talking about infrastructure. You've got three types of visitor who are doing wild camping. There are those who do it all the time, leave no trace. They love the countryside, they understand the access code, and that's great. There are those perhaps who maybe did it when they were younger and haven't done it since, or are doing it for the first time, and they just don't understand how they behave, what they're meant to be doing. And that's an educational piece, as Mark mentioned. But I think there is an open door there. And then sadly, there is another cohort who perhaps would have been off at Reading, Glastonbury, wherever, but certainly not touring around Scotland. And those, we see it right across the UK. It's not just in Scotland, it's in Wales, it's in the Lake District. At the weekend in Northern Ireland, there was one as well. And that's where large groups of people gather to listen to music, to have a party. And that's not wild camping, that's just antisocial behaviour. And that is a law enforcement issue. And that's not something, unfortunately, that the tourism industry can control, because we don't have the resources to do it. And there's been some horrendous stories from across the country in terms of people just leaving behind tents and sort of portable barbecues and all of that. And that, it is very, very difficult. That takes a long time to try and get the message across that it's unacceptable. And really, it's not difficult. If you can bring something with you, you can take it away at the same time. Now, there are other issues around all of that, because a lot of the amenities, I go back to what I was saying, if the industry can't open up at the same time, you do get the law of unintended consequences. So public amenities like toilets, car parks, some of the rangers were on furlough. So we don't actually have at our disposal yet all the resources that are required, to make sure that we can manage this in a controllable way.
I think, Fiona, just coming back into your question about, are we seeing new visitors? I've often said this before, and again, apologies if people on the call have heard me say it, but I have no harm. 70% of people who live in Scotland have probably not experienced what's on their own doorstep. I lived and worked in Cape Town in South Africa many years ago, and I was told that 70% of people have never been up Table Mountain who live in Cape Town. And then I thought to myself, where haven't I been that's on my doorstep? And there were many, many places that I hadn't been to. And I'm sure, many people in the urban areas of Scotland had never been out to the far highlands and parts of the countryside, and therefore it's new to them. I think there's also another group of camping and caravanning, camping population that we also must be conscious of, and that those are people who are not used to doing it because they've actually always holidayed in hotels or even in self-catering units, and are now in a position where their own sort of financial situation has changed considerably, and they're actually taking a choice to do it on the cheap or having to learn how to do it. And it's not in any way condoning the behaviour that we've seen from some, but this education piece is really important. And there's a great piece of work going on. There's a working group together with the National Parks, Wild Scotland, some of the destinations as well, who have come together to produce some tongue-in-cheek advertorial or pieces to show people what not to do or how to do it. You know, Malcolm and myself are actually involved in a conversation later on this week with members of the tourism team and the national parks on looking at how we can upweight some of the enforcement and the visitor park management piece to alleviate these types of pressures in the future.
That's great stuff. This is an interesting one and almost impossible to answer, but I'm going to throw it at you anyway. Projecting forwards, how do you both anticipate 2021 developing? Have you got your crystal ball out?
Well, yeah. Right. Let's look at the statistics before we look at anything else. So the data indicates that actually forward bookings are very strong right across the piece. So whether it's conferences, it's bookings, and I've heard from, you know, self-caterers themselves saying that, you know, they're looking forward to a very strong 2021. So given a fair wind, actually 2021 could be a very good year for Scottish tourism, but we don't know. You know, tomorrow, today, someone could announce a lockdown. There could be an outbreak. So yeah, I mean, it's a difficult thing, but I'll go back to what we're saying right at the beginning. The sentiment towards Scotland is very strong. We know that people want to come to Scotland, and the very fact that, you know, they are booking ahead indicates that there is confidence in the country and that they'll be welcome here and they'll have a great time. We just have to hope that circumstance allows that to happen.
We're hearing the same, Fiona, from all the different sectors of the industry. You know, there are many who've actually managed to you know, take those bookings and push them into next year. So they've filled up their booking diaries quite well. Just off the our board call, as I said, and with Rebecca Brooks from Abbey Tours, you know, there's a strong demand still. And as Malcolm was just saying, you know, Scotland is very much a destination of choice. And I think that, you know, is for all the reasons that we know it always has been. It's and if we can demonstrate that we can manage and deliver tourism safely, then that's got to be, you know, the only thing that we can have that's in our control. The worst thing is, though, you know, travel transport regulations get in the way and it shuts down the country, and we'll have to manage through that. But we just need to keep planning ahead. And even though, you know, I'm hearing from the golf tourism sector, you know, we're already hearing that Americans are now deferring from next year, but they're still coming for 2023. So it's not switched off the tap. And we are in a much stronger place than our nearest competitor, and being Ireland at the moment. Ireland is in a desperate position to try and actually secure future bookings because of some of the connectivity restrictions and air bridges, which are far, far more severe than our own.
On that sort of subject, the ASSC has got another, well, it's a UK-wide survey out just now. So if anybody hasn't taken part in that survey, please do. It's looking at the impact of COVID-19 on the sector, but it's also looking at confidence going forwards. And all these discussions will help to inform future conversations with the STA, Visit Scotland, and the Scottish Government. So please do get involved with that survey. We've had another good comment here. We're so glad to be open, but like all businesses, there's a cost of being open between bookings, laundry, mountains, I know about those, and cleaning protocols. I know all about those too, actually, sorry. The VAT reduction is a welcome concession which will go some way to paying for this. Where does the current campaign to reduce VAT actually being applied to retain things past January? Mark?
So as I was saying earlier, as part of the recommendations for recovery and ongoing pieces to continue to push for VAT to be held at that 5% level, it's a slight challenge because originally, obviously, our efforts have all been based around making us competitive in price. and therefore the argument for the longer term hold of reduced VAT is a bit different to what it was originally. But the cost of responding and managing COVID in the way that businesses are having to do so, and I know the Queen of Clean even herself told me how much cleaning costs have gone up in her establishment. So what we are also, and I think everybody on the call will hopefully realise that this isn't unique to Scotland tourism. We have our colleagues south of the border. We're all singing off the same hymn sheet and making those same representations into the Treasury, where much of the dependency on our sort of fiscal position will be in the future to gain that ongoing support over the coming months, but also changes in VAT, etc., are absolutely still sit as a reserved matter. So through the UK Visitor Economy Recovery Group, which the STA sits on, and working with colleagues in UK hospitality and other organisations of trade bodies as well, we're all on the same page with this. So putting that pressure into government Westminster is something that won't stop. So let's hope what I'm hearing is that we're not going to see any indications coming out of the Treasury until sort of November time as to what those future support mechanisms and packages might be for the sector, but we'll keep pushing hard because time is against us and we need to be able to plan as well.
Thanks, Mark. And just to kind of end on a positive note, because I like to stay positive if possible, what positives or opportunities can you see, Malcolm? Massive market, lots of people wanting to come to Scotland, holiday in their own country.
Yeah, I think those are the obvious ones, but actually I'll go back to the point Mark was making about the strategy. I actually think coming out of this, what we can do is accelerate a number of elements within the overall strategy. I think the desire to green the economy is something that plays right into tourism's hands. It's a strength that we have and we need to build on, and we can do a lot more around all of that. I think technology has demonstrated, that it can be not just a great means of communication, but also, it's a way of saving cost as well, and making the business more competitive. I think also in terms of the collaboration that's been demonstrated over the sort of last 6 months in particular, there is a willingness to make sure that Scotland does become that destination of choice and does become a world leader in tourism. And I would take great heart from, sadly, the experience that we've all had to go through. But once we do get to the other side, I'm absolutely convinced that we'll motor on.
I like that. That's a good thing to think about. Mark, any sort of final positive thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's what I touched on earlier. I think tourism is far better understood now than it's ever been before, and I think we're at the top table. I think there's a recognition that we are probably a sector that can actually really drive the nation's recovery through, the economy, and hopefully more within our government backbenchers will understand and listen. And I think there are, the other benefits that we have. More people will understand and experience Scotland for what it has to offer. And, the best power of any sales initiative is actually the power of referral and telling your friends and things. And, if we're not permitted to be on paid media for whatever reason, the more people that shout about Scotland and what it has to offer collectively, then that's got to be a good thing too. And of course, we mustn't forget our food and drink. If we can have more people consuming and eating what's grown and produced in your own backyard, then that's got to be good for our supply chain too. And I would end on suppliers. We can't forget, it's absolutely essential that we continue to support local producers and local businesses in this recovery process, because without a healthy, robust supply chain, we will have no front end. And that is really, again, the power of collaboration and working together in destinations to treat this, as a joint effort in recovery. And going back to the strategy, that whole emphasis was about doing this together with communities as one, using the Scottish Rugby slogan. And if we work as one and do it together as one, we'll come out stronger.
Excellent. So just to wrap this up and going back to food and drink and supply chain, what's your favourite Tunnocks product? Caramel wafer, tea cake, Malcolm?
Probably the wafer, I would say.
I'm going with that. Mark?
I'll stick with the wafer, and if you can, I'll send you my address, so accept a box gladly. I thought you were going to magic one up to come in behind me through the door as well. Yeah, it has to be, you know.
Oh, I failed on that one. I'm so sorry. Mark, Malcolm, thank you so much for your time today and for answering some fairly tricky questions and for your thoughts. I really appreciate it. Just to let everybody else know that this series of webinars is going to be going on throughout September and then throughout the rest of the year, in fact. So the next one next week is about dynamic pricing, which I think is going to end up being incredibly important going forwards for our sector. Hotel industry has been using it for years and years, and it's time we sort of caught up with it. So do join us for some of the other talks. There's also a really interesting one on the 29th of September with the short-term let delivery group looking at short-term let legislation going forwards. So please join us. Thank you so much for coming along today and have a wonderful Tuesday. Thank you.
Thank you.